All right, so welcome everybody. This is our session, Demystifying Dyslexia, Understanding Assessment and the Simple View of Reading. We're really pleased to have Dr. Andrew Shannock here, excuse me.
That's okay.
From the
I
College
blame my parents for that last name, for God's sake.
Yeah,
Right.
He's from the College of St. Rose, and he's going to do the presentation. If anyone does not want to be on the recording, you can stop your video or turn off your camera. If you do not want your name to appear, you are free to change your name by clicking the three dots on the bottom of the screen and select participants. Hover over your name, select more, and then rename. And now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to do this, and I'm Andrew Shannock. I'm at the College of St. Rose in school psychology. So I've been there for the past 15 years. My God, I don't know how that's happened. Originally from downstate New York, Rockland County. Woo, in the house. Yes, good, excellent. And then I lived in Philadelphia for many years, and that's where I did my graduate training. And as a school psychologist, I've worked in urban, rural, and suburban districts, private schools, parochial schools, public schools. I wasn't fired a lot. I just moved a bunch of places. And throughout my career, I've been able to work with districts across the country to assist them in terms of overall assessment, but also in terms of MTSS and RTI. And it's been, what's fascinating is that it seems like all over the country, everyone has the same issue. And so when I go to different districts, they always feel like they're behind or not doing as much as they can. But I'm like, well, you're just wherever every other district is. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or make people feel good about things. But the goal usually is to get as many educators and education professionals together and really working for the benefit of that child. And that all too often, what I see is like the school psychologists over there, the teachers over there, the speech language pathologists over there, and we all come to some crazy meeting and no one's really talked beforehand. And those meetings get a little weird. And then it comes to even just the understanding of what is dyslexia. And the nuance of dyslexia is often misunderstood as well. And how much language is really spoken within the districts. People often are talking past each other rather than kind of having one straight definition where we're all on the same page. So when we use that language, we could use it. I've been in districts where they say, you can't use the word dyslexia. I was like, what? They're like, no, you can't say that. I'm like, oh, let me see. Dyslexia. Look, I said it. It's magic. So it's really trying to help people along of what can and what cannot happen. So and this used to be like a 6-hour presentation that I shortened to 3 hours. I shortened to 2 hours, but I'm going to shorten it to 1 hour. So enjoy the ride. So this should be fun. So let me just go here and let me just mark here. And so just quickly about St. Rose, we have a scholarship called Project Thrive for school psychologists and special ed teachers. For those who are, for populations that are not represented typically within special ed or school psychology, such as marginalized culture and linguistic groups, that it would pay in school psychology. We're a 3-year program. It would pay for 2 years of your program. So it's a really great scholarship. And I would encourage people to kind of find out more about it. Just before I go into anything else, big fan of some of the slides I stole from these folks, and they know about it. And so David Kilpatrick, Ann Archer, Don Flanagan, John Gruder, the Reading League, which is great, Sam Ortiz, lots of folks that I kind of use and work with and so appreciative of. So really the goal is trying to figure out like what's happening in schools now to see if I have a general sense of what's going on in schools. Getting educators on board how to better understand, define, and incorporate language and assessment into daily practice. What is the simple view of reading? Defining dyslexia, and then maybe a case review if we have enough time to be able to do that, and we'll try to figure out in terms of questions as well. I did have a Dropbox. I'm not sure if you have a link to this that I'm hoping that is on there. If not, I hope my PowerPoint, but this is my email address. Shannock@strose.edu, and you're welcome to contact me anytime. It makes me feel popular when people email me, so it's very exciting. But you should have a link to that. But we know that this has been a crazy year in terms of COVID and the different vaccinations. What are we going to do? The mental health issues that's going to happen, especially in the fall, when hopefully that we're all back in person as much as possible. The mental health issues that have gone on this past year has just really exploded, and it's really going to impact a lot. And it's going to also impact how we're recognizing kids and trying to sift out between some mental health issues as well as some academic issues of thinking about all that. We know, this is from DC School District, that the gap is widening in terms of reading skills. In DC, at the beginning of the academic year, the number of Black children who met literacy benchmarks dropped by 14 percentage points to 31%. And for white students, it dropped 6 points to 67%. So you can start to see some of those gaps that have really grown throughout this past year. And I'm really concerned about the fall, when suddenly we're going to be hit with a ton of referrals for assessment. And rather than trying to figure out where we are with these kids right now, and that a lot of kids are going to be misdiagnosed in terms of needing special education services or tier 3, depending on the district that you're in. If you have a good RTI system, and I haven't met many districts that have a good RTI MTSS system, there's still a lot of bugs to all of that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. That's just quickly in terms of thoughts on how COVID is going to impact evaluation, that we do, especially if you're collecting local norms with DIBELS and other kind of materials, we're going to need to have to alter some of those. That where things were 2 years ago to where the norm should be now is going to be different. That the expectations, the scope and sequence of K through 3 should be readjusted. That some kids have not had good reading, writing, or math instruction for about a year. And then they're going to come in, they're going to be quote unquote behind grade level, but they're not. They just weren't taught anything. So it's not that they're behind grade level and they need special ed. That's not the case. And that we have to identify which of our kids are about 80% are doing okay. And so it's bottom 20% that I'm really concerned about and want to do more pointed interventions for those folks. And really, there's not been a learning loss. There's been a teaching loss this year. No, people don't, like, if you know how to read, you don't suddenly forget because you haven't been reading for a year. There's been a teaching loss. So we need to readjust what the expectations are, especially at the K through 3 level. And for me personally, that I'm hoping that when we start up school in the fall, and even now I wish it was happening, that the first couple of weeks really be built on reestablishing community and really establishing some mental health around things for both the faculty and the students and the administrators and everybody involved. That if we have to come to some type of consensus around that, so that we can do a better job of being effective educators at the end of the day. And this is a poster that I usually had in my office along the way, that not everybody who struggles in school is disabled, nor does every student who fails a state test has a learning problem because there's a specific learning disability. But all too often I find in districts that sometimes the SLD, the specific learning disability identification, is for the convenience of the adults. It should never be for the convenience of the adults. It should be, and it should not be a way for a kid to get extra help. That is not what special education is about at all. That we need to be able to provide the right interventions for that kid. And some kids need maybe some extra time and pointed small group resource to help them to develop those skills in both reading, writing, and math to help them thrive within the school building. That unfortunately, what I find is that not many folks know what is reading, what is writing, what is math. That we have these child study teams or pre-referral teams. And when I go around and I talk to those teams, and no malice is meant, but when I start to ask them, so tell me a good intervention you could do to help a kid with morphemes. Tell me a good intervention you could do to help a kid with math facts. Tell me a good intervention you could do to help a kid spell using AI blend or something like that. And they can't. And again, not to any malice, but then they start to brainstorm different ideas. But how could you possibly brainstorm ideas if you're not sure what is reading, what is writing, what is math? And we get caught in this loop of doing incorrect interventions because we're not doing something that's evidence-based and really understanding the tenets of these various academic areas. And further, when we start thinking about, and I'm a school psychologist, that people just try to do these assessments and they look at this IQ score versus achievement score, and nobody knows what they're talking about. The numbers, you just can't make a diagnosis by just comparing numbers. You have to understand the full context of the kid and use some of those normative assessments to help out to better identify what might be going on. And should we have time at the end, I'll give you one of my evaluations I did recently. Now, for most educators, what I try to tell them is that after you've done a thing the same way for 2 years, look it over carefully. After 5 years, look at it with suspicion. And after 10 years, throw it away and start all over. I've had lots of grizzled veterans, right, tell me that they've done this since their graduate days. I'm like, things have changed. We have to change with what is going on. And because ultimately the practice of today is the malpractice of tomorrow. So do folks agree to this, that a teaching method might work with all the students some of the time, and a teaching method might work with some students all the time, but there's really no teaching method that works with all students all the time. That's not the case. And typically when I talk to teachers, school psychologists, speech languages, administrators, parents, everyone seems to agree to this. And yet those kids who get referred for special education are often just, they're not responding to how that teacher is necessarily teaching their classroom at that moment. So it's not about the kid, it's just about how we're going to differentiate to get more kids to better understand what's going on. And I'm not talking about different learning styles, we'll get to that. There's no such thing as different learning styles. There are different ways to teach, but they're not different learning styles. But to just refer them doesn't make any sense, because special education is not extra help. And special education in itself is not special, not because people don't work hard, not because the kids don't bust their tails in there, but what is special about it? And often what we do is we try to identify kids for special ed so they get more time on test, someone to help them read or whatever it is, rather than try to figure out what skill do we need to teach these kids. I want to make the intervention special, not this other place that's special. And if you think about what's going on in terms of how, when I talk about what is reading, what is writing, what is math, for all educators, there's been this teacher prep review. I don't know if people have seen these at all. And they look at all the syllabi and talk to different teacher education programs across the country. And what they found, I'll talk about math first. What they found was that 1% of 201 graduate elementary programs provide the teachers that they're teaching enough information for them to teach math. 1% of 201 graduate elementary programs. And I bet if I ask folks who here is bad at math, that a whole bunch of people would raise their hand for some reason. All like, oh yeah, I'm bad at math, and they would laugh about it. And I'm like, it's not funny that I get upset at the teacher ed programs that taught teachers not to know how to teach math and make you feel bad about math. That's no good. Math is important. And yet somehow we're allowed to say that we're not so good at math. It goes on to say that, this is from 2020, that programs are doing a little better job in terms of teaching the components of reading. However, phonemic awareness, the first skill that kids have to master to become successful readers, remain the least likely to be taught in the program coursework. Barely half the programs cover it adequately. So if our teachers don't know about phonemic awareness and phonics and other things that we'll cover today, then how are we expecting the kids to be able to understand? How are they supposed to be able to consume their curriculum? And they're they want this. They're dying for this. They want better information to do better by their kids. I've yet to meet a teacher that doesn't want their kid to be successful. The thing that makes teachers great is that they lose sleep, even though they had 99 kids successful, one kid didn't do so well. And all teachers will lose sleep over that. I lose sleep over that. It's about some of the kids that I still think about. It just sticks with us because we care and we want everyone to be successful. So here is just some information. So phonemic awareness, you'll see that's 2020 is all the orange bars, right? So we are seeing that programs are getting better at this, but still, I mean, only half the programs are teaching about phonemic awareness. 2/3 are teaching about phonics. What's the other third teaching? Fluency is still down low. Vocabulary is still low. Language is such a big part about all this that how are teacher education programs teaching about language comprehension, which is such a key component of reading. And so that's why, you know, I happen to be the only person in the world who loves IEP meetings. Oh, good God, I love them so much. They're awesome because they're so different every single time. No, they're not. They're the same meeting all the time, right? We all go around, people who've been in these meetings, you all go around, oh, Johnny's such a good boy. He worked so hard this year. He's still struggling. So you know what we're going to do for him next year? The same thing. We're going to do the same thing for him next year. It happens in all districts all across the country. But then we're going to say the next year, he'll have Mr. Smith. And we're like, oh yes, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith is great. He'll help him out. Including the current teacher that we're insulting. Like, oh no, Mr. Smith, he's great. He'll help him. Mr. Smith is not an intervention. What was the program that happened to help out that kid to read, write, or do math? Now, I have these meetings where people love to fan themselves. They're like, oh yes, he has a processing problem. I'm like, what? Yes, he has a processing problem. I'm like, are you saying, are you hot? Is that what's going on? Do I have to steal second base? I don't understand what the signal is. They're like, no, 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 he has a processing problem. I'm like, so do you mean that he has difficulty with his reasoning skills, his working memory, his long-term retrieval, his ability to kind of work under time pressure? What specific processing area are you talking about? I'm like, oh, that's a good question. He is a processing problem. Like, no, we have to kind of figure out what's going on and why that's happening. And now what I find when I go to these meetings, people love to throw out, I've heard at meetings, he's a little bipolar. I'm like, oh, good God, what the hell is that? Or a touch Aspie, I've heard in the past. There's crazy things at meetings. And now what I love to hear is that, oh, he has executive function issues. Yeah. I'm like, so which executive function do you mean? Do you mean his shifting? Do you mean his ability to kind of start the day? Do you mean his ability to shift? Do you mean his ability to transfer classes? What exact executive function are you talking about? And they just say it's executive function. Well, that doesn't help anybody out. We have to be able to narrow things down, kind of figure things out, and that I want to make sure that they're parent friendly and that the data that we provide is parent friendly. I was at one meeting where they said the kid has a 54 ORF. I was like, what? Who's using Hobbit language at a meeting? I don't understand this. And the parents just nodded their head. Oh yes, 54 ORF. I'm like, you don't know what that means, do you? They're like, no, we don't know what that means. So the person, oh, I'm sorry. I meant he's reading 50, that he is, he's reading 54 words a minute. And the parents like, oh, okay. I'm like, no, what? They're like, oh, I'm sorry. He's reading 54 where everyone else is reading 102 words per minute. Now the parents understand. So we have to be able to provide better information, better data so everybody can be involved. And because I'm a huge believer in labels, I love labels, huge fan of labels, but only if we get it right. If we just say a kid is learning disabled, or even if we say he has dyslexia, what do people know about what that is? That if I go into the doctor's office and I say I have a head pain, and the doctor says, well, I don't believe in labels, so it could either be a headache or a tumor. I'm like, you give me a label. So we need to do a better job of what we're looking at when we have kids. And so that if we all know what is reading, what is writing, what is math, and all those different academic areas, understand social emotional functioning, we could do a much better job of diagnosis and do a much better job of intervention. You know, are we speaking the same language? That is a C+ a good grade or a bad grade? I don't know. I love going to these meetings where they say he's making progress. I have no clue what that means. Zero. Or to tell me that a kid is struggling, I'm like, duh, that's why we're having a meeting. What do you mean he's struggling? And then I get kids who are at the in the fifth grade reading at a second grade level, and we say they're struggling. But let's say we give them the best intervention possible. They're not going to be reading at a fifth grade level right away. And imagine at the end of the year, we say, oh, he's still struggling, but he worked hard. That's not nice. What is that about? That kid worked their tails off, the teachers worked their tails off, and we're going to say struggling? That means we don't know where that kid is and where that kid was and where that kid is. So when I try to eliminate the words progress and struggling for all my meetings, show me the data, let me know what's going on. For example, here's an IP that I had once where it said that this is in the PLEPS, right? The present levels of performance, right? That this is supposed to be the baseline for the kid. And it says that Ben has made steady progress. I have no clue what steady progress is, but okay. He enjoys school, willing to do his best. He's an independent. He runs errands independently. That's lovely. But he's made strong progress in reading. I guess that's different than steady progress. I'm not really sure. He's able to decode at a guided reading level MN text that nobody ever knows anything about. When you say that he's at this level text, nobody knows what they're talking about. And in fact, if you go to Fontes of Pinnell, if you go to their website, they say you're not supposed to report the level. They say that explicitly. So nobody knows what that is. But he's starting to sound out words, but it's very challenging. Well, thank God you said it's very challenging, because if you just said it's challenging, I wouldn't care. But now that you said it's very challenging, now suddenly I care. Anytime you want to write the word very, just put the word damn there instead. It was damn challenging, right? There's no reason for it, right? Then it says Ben struggles, he needs a lot of. All this language doesn't help anything. In fact, it confuses things and nobody knows what's going on. So when I think about doing evaluations, and again, I'm a downstate New Yorker, so I enjoy this little video here, that whenever we think about assessment, and we'll get to dyslexia in a moment here, because it's important just to kind of figuring all this out, that a couple of the things that's important in all assessment and just determining what's going on with the kid is that the first thing is, I have yet to meet a lazy child. Not a one. I've been to all different districts all across the country. Not a single kid have I met that's lazy. I have met kids who've had difficulty in reading, and that they had difficulty in reading in kindergarten. And what are they reminded about every single day they go to kindergarten? That they have hard time reading. They're reminded about that every single day in kindergarten, every single day in first grade, every single day in second grade, every day in third grade, every day in fourth grade, every day in fifth grade, every day in sixth grade. I don't even know why they're coming to school, because supposedly they're getting help along the way when they're really not. So the only person they could blame is themselves. Every day in eighth grade, every day in ninth grade, every day in 10th grade. And then we wonder in high school why they're not so interested in going. Right? So they work their tails off just as much as the educators work their tails off, but we just have to figure out how we're going to connect in order to kind of get those kids moving in the right direction. But the same point that we can't blame parents all the time. That's my dad on the right, who's very annoyed at me because he's taking his first selfie, and good God, that's my future. So here I go. But the only thing that, especially now with COVID, I'm so glad, part of it is just to realize the amount of pressure that parents are under in just trying to work with their kids and also try to work, that especially in terms of women, but that, that when, for me, the only thing, I don't expect this anymore, but I used to only expect from parents is to house their kid, feed their kid, clothe their kid. I no longer expect those three things. I expect less than that, that anything parents do above and beyond that is gravy. That is our job to teach kids, our job to motivate them to learn, our job to kind of get them going. Is it better if parents are involved in the kids' education? Absolutely. But don't we all know parents who can't do that for a variety of reasons, whether there's cultural and linguistic issues, whether there's just financial issues. So if our districts had only homes or families where they could barely house, feed, and clothe their children, would our school be successful? The answer should be yes, because we are trained educators that can help all the kids. And that's why we should be successful. Is it harder? Absolutely. But we still need to focus on what we can do and stop saying, well, if the parents just did that, or if the parents just did that. That the term just is not fair. And you all know that. That to say you just have to do that, well, listen, I just have to dunk the ball. That's not going to happen. So don't minimize the fact that I can't do that for a variety of reasons, including helping a kid with homework. So all that kind of leads to just what is reading and what we think about reading. And you have this thing that's based on the science of reading called the simple view of reading. It's not so simple, but when you break it down, it gets kind of simple. That a lot of what I take is from a whole bunch of folks, but David Kilpatrick, who's in New York and Cortland, and the Reading League, they've done a lot of great work. All the advocates out there should absolutely be getting these books if they want to better advocate for the kids. The book on the left is through the Reading League. That's being updated for a variety of reasons, but there's a lot of good stuff in that. That's my kind of like my cliff notes, my spark notes to the book on the right, which is a much more dense text, but a really important text. And the book in the middle is one of the easiest books I've read in terms of research and whatnot. But overall, reading is, you have to be able to read the words to be able to comprehend what you're reading. So you have to be able to decode, you have to be able to identify and read that word. Now and the other end of it, language comprehension, is I have to be able to understand the words I'm reading. So if I'm able to read the words and I'm able to understand the words I'm reading, then I have good reading comprehension. So it's decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So for example, I could read Spanish, but I don't know what the heck I'm reading, but I could read relatively fluently, but I don't have the language behind it or the vocabulary to put to those words, so I don't know what I'm reading about. But if I had a hard time reading words in the first place, well, if you can't read the words, you can't comprehend the text. And I've actually had people come up to me and go, not only can he not read, but he can't comprehend. I'm like, I hope so. Right? What is that? And the reason they do that is because they give me a score. They show me one score on his word reading and another score on his reading comprehension. I'm like, yes, that's supposed to be low. Can't do it. So the mathematical formula is D times LC equals RC, or reading comprehension. That if I have good decoding, 1, language comprehension, a 1, so 1 times 1 equals 1. If either of these is 0, then 0 times 1, and your reading comprehension is not going to be good. And I've been to several districts where they say, oh my God, the reading comprehension of all of our kids is terrible. I'm like, okay. I start looking at to see how their kids are able to break down words, and they're not able to, and that's why they can't comprehend whatever they're able to what they're supposed to be reading. So it's less of a reading comprehension issue, it's more of a language or a decoding issue. And in some folks are kind of thinking about reading comprehension is really just a product of all the other earlier skills. There are ways to teach about reading comprehension, but you need all those other skills before we can even think about trying to comprehend what we're reading. So hopefully that makes sense. So that with the word level reading and the oral language are relatively independent. But that this is important in terms of that the oral language comprehension skills of kids represents the outer limit of their reading comprehension. So when you, in essence, you cannot comprehend more than you could understand linguistically. That's going to be the outer edge of your reading comprehension. So you're not going to be you're not going to comprehend what you read better than you understand language. It is language that's going to be the outer edge of your reading comprehension. So when you're able to read words skillfully, the differences between language comprehension and reading comprehension is negligible. They're going to be pretty much the same. So if you have access to the text, meaning that you're able to read the text and you have good language, you'll be able to understand what you're reading in the text. So if I look at the different ways of thinking about reading, that if you look at the top right corner, if I could read the words and I have good language, well, then I'm a typical reader. But if I look at the left corner, I can't read words, but I have good language. You've all met those kids, right? The kid who's like tells everything about the History Channel, and they could go through the whole thing, and then you give them a book. They're like, I can't do this. You're like, what happened here? But so if I have good language and bad, my ability to read words is bad, well, that's dyslexia. That I don't have access to the text. I can't decode the words. And when I'm able to decode the words, I'll be able to understand the text. That's where we're talking about dyslexia. And then if I look at the bottom left, we have weak word identification, weak sight word, weak ability to kind of decode words, and my language is weak. Those kids, my heart goes out to them because there's a lot to do there. And that's a mixed reading disorder. And if I look to the bottom right, where I could read words, but I don't have really good language comprehension, well, those kids may have a real language deficit. So if I think about what goes on here, the 3 kids outside the typical reader, if I put them all in special ed or all in one group, that is improper because we need to do 3 different things for these 3 different groups. And I'm making it easy with just these 3 groups. So when we start to look at, and by the way, I think when you do a dyslexia presentation, you have to have the ladder of reading in. This is one of those things. I'll have a Scarborough rope later on, so anyone who knows that. But if you look in terms of what your classrooms are going to look like often in different schools, that you want to have a structured literacy approach. However you're going to teach reading, about 5% of the kids can be able to read just effortlessly. They're just away they go. It doesn't matter what you do, right? I had a friend who was like, they did phonemes and phonological awareness when the kids were like in utero. I went to the house and everything I touched was leapfrog. It was like B, bathroom. I'm like, oh, good God, I just want to go. I just want to go. So you have these kids who just pick some of that up based on where, in so many ways, of a lot of language that they may have gotten along the way. You have another 35% that learning to read is relatively easy with just a broad instruction. But you have about 10 to 15% of those kids who can't decode. And those kids really need a code-based, explicit, systematic, sequential, diagnostic instruction with many repetitions. They're going to need a lot of work. And we could do this both in terms of a whole class, but also in terms of small group. With that, you need a rich oral program that have to have structured synthetic phonics. You need emphasis on phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. Phonological awareness, understanding all the various sounds of language. Phonemic awareness, understanding the different sounds of words. Having decodable, readable books, not books that have words. How many children's books have we seen? We're like, I could barely read this thing. Where does that word, right? Who put an onomatopoeia in this book? That makes no sense. The book should be decodable. Emphasizing blending to read and emphasizing segmenting to spell. So this is part of what you want your classrooms to kind of look like. And if you want to know more about this, and again, this is just a shortened version, this is kind of like the Cliff Notes version, but the Reading League has tons of great videos about different pieces of doing some of this. One video that I really like is Understanding Statistics and Research, which is at the bottom right around there. And now I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the research, especially around balanced literacy, that's way off. And it talks about why it is off and understanding some of the research behind this. 5 from 5 is great there in Long Island. They're awesome. And lifelong literacy is great. And if you ever get to visit Australia, go visit them. So that's where they're located. So someday I hope to get there. So that'll be great. So let's come back to decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. This is the simple view, but it's not so simple because if I think about language, there's so much to language, right? We have your background knowledge, academic skills, how you're talking in different types of settings. There's a lot to it. And this is where our speech language pathologists can be super helpful for us. And they could also help us break down those main components of language, which is oral language and vocabulary. So how well do your CST or your pre-referral teams, IST, SST, all those kind of groups, those pre-referral meetings, know about expressive language, receptive language, knowledge of words, morphology, syntax, and pragmatics, that they understand these various things and have a good grasp of that, because those are the teams that are giving advice to the other teachers. They have to be the leaders around this. And if they're not sure of it, and they mean no malice around it at all, in fact, they're the leaders within the school building, that if they learn about this stuff, they could provide so much great information, and no longer would an IST be an obstacle of getting the kid help, where it would actually be helping the kid get help. So even if I look at decoding, right, decoding is it's not so simple. We have print concepts, we have phonological awareness, we have sight word recognition, sight vocabulary, your fluency in which to read, right? The more fluent you are, the better, most likely, you're able to comprehend. But what's included in that, I mean, phonological awareness, awareness of syllables, onset and rhyme. When people say to me, well, rhyme is misspelled, I'm like, okay, no, thank you, it's spelled correctly. And so it's understanding some of those connections that are meaningful. That phonics, understanding the letter system that we have, knowing about high frequency words, beginning phonics, advanced phonics. So there's a lot to it, but if we have a good structured system, we could address a lot of the reading issues that come in kindergarten, first grade, pre-K. We could address those issues immediately. But a lot of our programs are not addressing this, or they're addressing it in this balanced literacy approach that's not really helping out these kids who struggle with reading, because you need a real structured, systematic way of teaching this, explicit manner of teaching this to kids. Here's a Scarborough rope that I talked about, and it's a pretty colors of this one. I have a black and white version over here, so just in case people like that. So here's the pretty colors again. So that what in the short version is that you need all of these things to be a really skillful reader. You need a good background knowledge. You need a good vocabulary. If you don't have the vocabulary, how are you supposed to understand the words that are coming at you? You have to understand syntax and grammar for language structures, how to reason with the text that's in front of you. So that is all the language piece. And then if I look at word recognition, I'm thinking about how quickly you're able to recognize words. Can you decode? Do you have, can you work with different phonemes? So if I say, tell me the word cat, can you tell me the different phonemes of cat? So at, and if I give you those phonemes, can you put those phonemes together? And a lot of kids, the kids with dyslexia are going to have the most issue in terms of phonological awareness. So again, in terms of this one, just gives some better definitions around things. For the word recognition, looking at phonological awareness and syllables and phonemes, decoding, like I talked about the alphabetic principle, and sight recognition, that they're able to read the words right away. And I'm sure it comes up again, but again, dyslexia is not about reversing letters or what you see. It's an auditory issue. It's not a vision issue. It's visual input, but it's stored auditorily, which I'm sure is probably the next slide I just kind of did. So, but, oh, no, it's not the next slide, but I'll get to that again. So what I do in my reports now, I actually have the whole formula for the simple view of reading. And as a person who does independent evaluations, I will build my report around this. And I will relate everything back to and try to explain throughout my report of what dyslexia is. Now, the kid, after I do my assessment, I find is not dyslexic, but at least the parent understands why this might be going on and how I'm looking at the formula and trying to understand this. That my thought is that reports are there to inform, not to confuse. So the more relatable information, all the better. So I've thrown out some words that usually I go a little bit deeper into, but there is in that Dropbox that I have a link to, you have this from RISE in Arkansas, and it gives nice definitions to the various parts of reading. And so you'll see the what, the why, and the how, and it all leading to comprehension. So we have phonological awareness in the top left there is the ability to notice sounds and structure of spoken words. It's the ability to isolate, identify, manipulate language at the individual sound level, like at, right? If I look at phonics, phonics is a system of approaching reading that focuses on the relationship between letters and sounds. Ultimately, there's been some battle recently on my Twitter feed. And yes, I have the nerdiest Twitter feed around. I think I have every literacy expert on my Twitter feed. So it's just crazy. You want to try to teach reading, especially by putting the sounds with the letters. That's the best way. And it's also a good way of helping them along with phonological awareness. So you have all those various definitions, and I make sure that this is hung up prominently in my office. That I want everybody in my school to be used to this language, especially my pre-referral teams. They should know all the language on this and be comfortable to kind of speak to each other around this. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, for comprehension, it's that for this to happen, you have to have phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, and vocabulary. If one of those are broken down, then your comprehension is going to be broken down. So for maximum gains, that what we need to do as teachers is that we have to teach things systematically, meaning a specific scope and sequence. We have to be explicit in teaching in a clear, precise manner. We have to be engaging and put active participation and do immediate feedback. So that's why sometimes homework is not working, because it's not necessarily immediate. They need that immediate feedback right once they make an error. There's a great website called the Reading Universe that if you go there, so if you look at the top, it says decoding here, it says language here, right? So decoding times language equals comprehension. So it gives all the other different facets of this. And what's great about this website, if you look at this different cells, and I'm going to switch out and hope this works here. I'm going to switch out to my website. And let's see if that's PowerPoint. This should be it. Okay. So hopefully you could see on the screen. So I'm going to call out somebody just to make sure. Tara Moffat, do you see this on the screen? Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you. So good. So so if I click on one of the, I don't know, I'll just click on this beginning phonics. And so here we have a little video. Tell us what beginning phonics is. And below are a whole bunch of free resources, all for free, all different ways of teaching beginning phonics, all free. And here's a little video. It's 5 minutes long. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I just want you to get a sense of it.
Digraphs and trigraphs should be introduced separately. In this review lesson, the teacher provides practice for both skills.
So a digraph is two letters that make one sound. Exactly right. Two letters that make one sound. And a trigraph is three letters and one sound. Three letters that make one sound. Nice work. So let's start with our digraphs, okay? We're going to start with this digraph, CK. It says k. Excellent. So the word that I'm going to start with, remember, this is my turn. I'm going to start with the word stick, as in my dog is chewing on a stick. Watch me as I do this. Stick. 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 I have 4 sounds, so I'm going to put 4 colored tiles down. And now I'm going to touch and say just the sounds. Stick. Stick. Now I'm going to match the letters to these sounds. Stick. Okay? Now, let's do one together.
Okay. Does that seem hard to do? Does it make sense? Here are the sounds. Here are the number of sounds. Here's what the letters are. We're going to match those sounds to those letters. And did the kid know what a digraph was and a trigraph was? Holy freaking cow. Most of the audience right now don't know what a digraph or trigraph is, but this kid did, because we provided the vocabulary around that, around the teaching around all of this. And we can do stuff like this. So this is a great site. Like I said, you have lots of free stuff all there. And so when I go to districts, they're like, we don't have enough resources. I'm like, well, let me show you about 10 websites that provide all this stuff for free, all these different lesson plans, which I'll provide also within that Dropbox as well. So let me go back. Let's see if I do this right. Come on, 7. Look at me here. Let me get out of this here. And Tara Moffat, I'm sorry, because you're my only face. Can you see where it says phonological core deficit or no? No. So I just got to share again. Let's see.
No, we're still on the same page.
Okay, let's see if I do this right. Okay. Now, phonological core deficit. Yay, rock on. Thank you. I appreciate that. Help me out. So good. So let's go back to dyslexia here. The phonological core has gone from this from David Kilpatrick, that from the most common cause to really the universal cause of dyslexia, that you have a hard time with those various sounds, phonemic awareness, able to manipulate, segment, substitute different sounds. For example, it's funny, I had a graduate student once who was great, unbelievable, I can't believe, but she had difficulty with reading her whole life. And this is not as easy as I'm making it sound to be, but I was teaching her about some various things about reading. And I said, okay, so say the word snap. And she said snap. And I said, say snap without the sound. And she said, nope. I said, what? She's like, I don't know how to do that. She had reading issues her whole life. She felt really bad about herself as a student. And again, it's not that easy to kind of come up with something, but she didn't have, or she didn't understand like how to manipulate sounds, how to work with sounds, understand sounds. And so I can imagine what her life has been up to that point. She just happened to have the extra moxie to kind of get through and overcome and do that work to get to the graduate level. But boy, imagine carrying that along. And that nothing was really done to kind of help out that kid, to help them understand about phonological awareness and the phonemic awareness. So you have stuff like phonological working memory, rapid automatic naming, meaning that you could recognize the words right away, that that, so if I read Jack and Jill, I could read those right away. I have rapid automatic naming. I can name those weird squiggles. Phonemic blending, at, put those sounds together to come up with cat. That kids who are average or better in all of these don't have dyslexia as long as the phonological awareness assessment is or sensitive. But we don't find poor word readers without one or more of these characteristics. So imagine if all the educators knew this. Now we're all talking the same language. We know why this kid might be having some difficulty in reading. That early phonological awareness includes rhyming, alliteration, segmenting words. Whereas more basic, maybe blending sounds, segmenting words, and more advanced is manipulating those sounds, deleting or substituting sounds, right? With that snap without the sound. Or saying snap, but now take out the and put in the oo. So now you have to say the word slap. Think about what you have to do with that, by the way. That if I say snap, take out the N, put in the oo, that you have to hold on to the sound of snap, remove the N, the bring in the oo, holding on to the other sounds, drop that in, put all those sounds together, and then say the word slap, all within a millisecond. It's a miracle. All reading is miracle, by the way. I am just stunned by what goes on. I'm like, really? Wow, you could read that? That's amazing. And we kind of take it for granted. If I ask everybody here right now, do you remember how you learned how to read? Most of us don't remember. So that's what makes it difficult sometimes to kind of get these concepts and to understand. It's like, well, why can't he read? I'm like, well, why can't you know more about reading to understand why he can't read? So when we talk about phonemic awareness, I want to kind of remove word walls and put up sound walls. Sound walls will be awesome and kids love it. You see all the faces, you take pictures of their mouths so they know how to make the sounds. And you start to put the letters to the sounds that they're able to do. So word walls are often confusing because if you think about like AY, if you look, the sound of A is going to be different based on the letter sequence that we have. So word walls are awfully confusing. I would much prefer sound walls. They're great. And go use a speech language pathologist. They'll tell the kid how to move their mouth and they get excited because their mouths are on the wall. This is really helpful for kids. And it also is a reminder to teachers and parents, everyone, that this is a critical skill for all the kids. That if I want to distinguish skilled word readers from poor word readers, that the skilled word readers have the ability to identify unfamiliar words by sounding them out. and they could remember the words they read. So they don't have to be retaught that word multiple times. They could just reteach, they could teach themselves the words. That sight word vocabulary is not based on visual memory. You're not memorizing all the words that you're able to read. It's just not doable. It's not possible. It's not about visual memory. It's a visual input, but it's an auditory memory that we are mapping those words based on the auditory process. So, and I think that's what, especially when you hear about vision therapy to kind of help out kids reading, a lot of that is just junk. It's just not workable. Right. And we know that there's somebody in the capital region that does way too much of this, and it's kind of frustrating. So what I also like to tell people is that we don't write words. We actually write sequences of characters that are designed to represent sequences of phonemes in spoken words. Nancy, do I question or just? Okay, yeah. So we write sequences of characters that represent sequences of phonemes. How many of us have gone through the craziness of spelling lists that make no sense? They just give us spelling words and we just do it, just try to memorize, and then we forget it the next week. Right? These spelling words that when we think about spelling, that we're going to do it purposely, explicitly, that's going to deal with the different phonemes. And that we're not trying to remember words by visual memory. There is a great person, Dr. Cardenas Hagen at Middle Tennessee. She talks about different language that impacts spelling. So we have to she does a great job, and I really suggest going to her video. So common misconceptions about reading. Children learn to read different ways. That's not true. This confuses teaching and learning. We teach differently, but kids don't learn differently. They learn to read proficiently in only one way. That it's amazing about reading that we read 150 to 250 words a minute. That's insane. Now think about the kids who are dyslexic who could read maybe 75 words. That's a big difference. So they start to slow down, and that really impacts that kid's life as trying to read and try to gain more information. So when I talked about this self-teaching hypothesis, is that once I break the code, if I see a new word that I need to decode and kind of figure out, and I have a good vocabulary behind it, I could then remember what that word is, maybe after one or two presentations of that word. So for example, I was showing that at my high school or something like that, they were doing some gym thing for adults, and they were doing a bunch of classes, and it was called Pilates. I was like, what the heck is Pilates? I'm like, they're like, it's Pilates. I'm like, oh, okay. When I see the word Pilates, I know it's Pilates. I don't go Pilates. That doesn't happen anymore. It's automatic. It's part of my orthographic mapping. I know that word right away. Does it make sense? It's not like asparagus. That would be insane, right? So when I said Pilates, that's not a terrible guess on my part, is it? It's actually a pretty good guess, but it makes sense because I actually understand sound structure and other parts of language to understand that that word is Pilates. I almost said Pilates. That was exciting. Okay, so for things to be effortless and for effortless retrieval, you need a letter sound proficiency. You have to establish that relationship between sounds and letters unconsciously while reading, and that orthographic mapping develops naturally in 60 to 70% of the students who are just exposed to literacy activities. That last point is important because if we're doing a balanced literacy approach and we have 20 kids in the class, that means about, 14 kids are going to be doing okay no matter how you teach them. 6 kids will be struggling. You're going to say that, well, I have 14 doing well, 6 not doing well. It's clearly the 6 kids' fault. No, we didn't use the right lesson. That you could, whatever you teach, those 14 kids were going to learn how to read. I want to address those bottom 6 and do a much more systematic, explicit approach to reading using the science of reading and also understanding what's all about decoding and what's all about language. So that maybe I have 18 kids instead of 14 kids who are good readers, and I have 2 kids who I'm worried about, with 1 kid maybe needing a little bit extra goose in terms of their intervention, with 1 kid really struggling. That's a different story, and that makes my life much easier as a teacher. I could say the same thing for irregular words. People always talk about irregular words as causing kids confusion. It doesn't. It's rare about that. That usually after 1 or 2 exposures, kids can actually map and automatically recognize irregular words. We can make adjustments. And so irregular words are not the cause of any reading problem. So when we start looking at the literacy programs that we have to put into place, that they have to be systematic, they have to be sequential, they have to be explicit, and they have to be cumulative. That in sequential, I mean the logical and developmental progression. Understand that short vowels come before vowel blanks. That I want make sure that my curriculum is doing this. That in a lot of other type of lessons, that other type of systems, sometimes they're not addressing this in a systematic sequential way, and I'll show that in a minute here. Another way of looking at that by Nancy Young kind of shows that we have to worry about the phonology and the orthography, the written code of reading, of print, that you have to match those two together at the early levels. And then after they get that, then we have to think about morphology, syntax, and semantics. If our reading curriculums are not addressing this, then we're going to get a lot of kids who are going to be misdiagnosed with various reading issues, including dyslexia. A lot of kids that I get as a school psychologist, I wonder if they're more, I should classify them under dyspedagogia rather than a learning disability. And dyspedagogia is not a real word. It means incorrect teaching, right? Not because the teachers mean anything. There's no malice meant at all, zero. They want the kids to learn how to read. But if you're not teaching it the right way, then it looks like it's that kid who is disabled rather than it really being a disability of the curriculum. That's where we need, I like to make jokes, I like to be funny, the whole thing. But when it comes to identifying a kid with a learning disability, that means they have a neurological issue. I'm going to be awfully cautious before I identify some kid with a learning disability, so they have a neurological issue, until I make sure that kid has been taught correctly. So here is this 3Qing method that goes on a lot with balanced literacy that many of us just automatically take because we just kind of know it in some way, but it is kind of guessing at the text. That has anyone ever heard a teacher say, well, look at the picture and that'll help you figure out the word? Wait, what? Are you telling the kid to look away from the word? And what happens if that picture goes away? How is that kid supposed to remember the word after that? Or you tell them, well, read the whole sentence and then come back to that word. Well, that's no fun. And then after you read the whole sentence, you have to guess at that word. And if you have a bad language background, you can never figure out that word. And usually what the teacher does is read the word for that kid. And then we say, see, he's able to read it. No, he wasn't. So it's just not that effective approach. Trying to get the kids to guess at anything makes no sense. It is hard enough to read. And now all kids want to do is please their teachers. And when you say, come on, you could guess it, they feel like crap because they can't. Unless we teach them appropriately, can we then expect them to know what to do? So there was, in terms of this balanced literacy approach, a lot of it comes out of the Teacher College in New York. And so there's one program called Units of Study, but it's really where like balanced literacy kind of came from. The Teacher College actually looked at what balanced literacy is about. And what they found was that, and this was their own place recognizing that this isn't working so well, that one of the consistent findings was that the balanced literacy would be unlikely to lead to literacy success for all American public school children. That children who need additional practice opportunities in a specific area of reading or language development likely would not under this Units of Study or this balanced literacy, because practice opportunities are almost always optional. That this program is not going to help for those kids who are just trying to learn English. These students are not likely to get what they need from balanced literacy to read, write, speak, or listen at grade level. Now, understand that. This program is supposed to help kids read, write, speak, and understand language, and this program is not going to help you do it at all. And people still do it. But even worse is this, that a specific finding of the report is that this balanced literacy fails to systematically and concretely guide teachers to provide English learners the support they need to attain high levels of literacy development. And if we think about, especially now in terms of the amount of bilingual kids that we're getting within the capital region, the growing numbers of how many kids are going to really be left behind. if we're teaching them inappropriately. Okay. And if you've ever seen this little poster on a wall, or a teacher has given this out to you, understand that most of this doesn't work, right? If you look at try and lion, just reread the sentence and try to figure out what makes sense. That doesn't help the kid create mapping of those words so they have automatic sight word. Whereas a Skippy frog, skip the word and read back and try again. Or eagle eye, look at the picture and tell me what's in the picture that starts with the beginning letter. That doesn't help me understand the word. So a lot of this just doesn't work, and we know it doesn't work from just too much research. So when I look at the differences between two, structured literacy is going to be more normed, criterion referenced. Phonics instruction follows a very specific scope and sequence. It's systematic, sequential, explicit, and a direct instruction for mastery. Whereas in the balanced literacy, it works for some kids, but those kids are just natural readers. But if you want to address a larger group of kids, we're going with more of the structured literacy. So there's a great book, and it's a free book on Parker Phonics, the blue book to the bottom right. It's a free book about reading instruction in phonics. It's a great book, and it has a whole bunch of lesson plans, all free. So you could download it all for free. It's great. He has a lot of great resources, and a great Twitter feed. So when you start thinking about what is reading, that to think that reading is a natural process it's just crazy. I mean, it's just so much that goes on with it, that it requires us to understand the spoken language, that requires a skilled, systematic teaching. That the overwhelming evidence is that that phonemic awareness is a key building block to early reading, and kids just don't develop phonemic awareness by learning to read rather than the other way around. Good readers, definitely what they do is that they rely heavily on the information contained within the words themselves. They understand the morphology, what's the background of those words, so they could read it quickly and automatically. Has anyone ever watched the spelling bee on ESPN? Go watch that, because I can never spell any of the words, but those kids are like, is it a French derivative? Is this, is it that? They ask all these important questions about language to better understand how to spell the word. And there's always like a commentator's like, oh, that was a great question. Like, what? I don't understand how they got that word. Still amazing to me, but they know how to do it. They've not memorized the dictionary to be good spellers. What they did was they became consumers of what language is about and how the English language was built. That a majority of children really do need a systematic phonics instruction to establish early decoding skills and ongoing skilled multi-phonics teaching. And I'm not just talking about just phonics alone. It can't just be phonics. We have to include just all the different language pieces. We have to include all these different areas so to help the kid become much more richer of a reader at the end. So hopefully that was, that was a lot, for God's sake. So, Nancy, would I have about 5 minutes just to kind of go through a case okay, yes, good, okay. So I'm just going to talk about a case that I did recently, and it kind of goes to what I did and trying to look at dyslexia. And so this was a 15-year-old African-American 9th grader. For the first 10 years, he lived with his mother and stepfather and several half siblings that were much older. He was placed into his father's custody after there was some drugs being sold at the home. And the father that's taking care of him works 3 jobs. I don't know how he does it. It's just unbelievable. But this kid really grew up in just a chaotic household. And so the father didn't have that much information about academics. And so most of the information I was able to get was from report cards. So he supposedly was receiving tier 2 intervention, but does anyone know what that means? No one ever knows what that means. Everyone says he's getting tier 2. And I'm like, so what is that? They're like, tier 2. No, what is going on in tier 2? They go, tier 2. I go, stop that. Tell me what they are doing to teach. I had a kid who supposedly was math disabled. And I said, so what was the tier 2 intervention? They say worksheets. I'm like, so you didn't teach the kid? No, we gave him worksheets. I'm like, oh, good God. But I'm supposed to recognize that kid with a specific learning disability? That's insane. I cannot do that consciously and ethically. So it just said tier 2, but from grades 3 through 5, he was earning grades that were below proficient ELA, while other academic areas were within the proficient range. And this is like a super nice kid, really super nice. In 6th grade, he was getting tier 2 again. Suppose he was addressing decoding, comprehension, organization, test-taking skills. No data about the progress at all. And I bet that they really addressed organization, test-taking skills because the kid didn't know what to do with anything. So they try to teach him how to take a test rather than teach them the skills to help the kid learn how to read. No malice is meant. They just don't know how to teach that skill. That resource room should not be the de facto parent or homework help. If you have a resource room, that person should be teaching that kid a specific skill. I had a kid, again, in 9th grade who didn't know his multiplication tables, and the teacher said it's too late for him. I'm like, he's 15. I'm not done cooking yet. You need to teach that. That's our job. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So in 6th grade, he's getting low 90s in all the courses except for reading, where his grades are higher. And then when you look at his midterms and finals, suddenly they're 50s. Because he's not getting graded for, like, he's not getting his 90s because of homework. You know, when people grade up because they did homework. So those grades were all inflated. And that on the PSATs, he was at the 21st percentile in reading and writing along the way. Vincent told me that really had a great sense of humor, just super great. But in conversation, he had word finding difficulty. He just couldn't find the right word where you want to say. He said that he stuttered while reading. And I was like, what is that? And he said that when he gets stuck in a word, he just fits in a new word so he could finish the sentence. Good for him for trying to compensate, but can everyone understand why he may have had a hard time comprehending if he just puts in a random word into a sentence? But again, you have to understand, socially, he's great, and you want to help out this kid. You're like, oh, he's a good boy. We'll just leave him to it because he's not complaining about anything. He tries to anticipate words rather than read the words. He acknowledged that text that he can read, he may not understand the vocabulary. He said it. I don't even know why I did any testing. I should have stopped right here. Does that make sense? He doesn't have the language, and he may not have the decoding skills. Okay. He likes when teachers slow things down and read to him. Good for him. So I found his overall cognitive abilities, and they were in the average range. I looked at his ability to work under time pressure, and that was fine. His visual spatial skills, which are meaningless, but they were fine. But then I looked at his background knowledge, and there's a test out there called the WISC. I'm sure many people have heard of the WISC. And there's something called the VCI, or the Verbal Comprehension Index, that people know about. And the verbal comprehension doesn't measure verbal comprehension. Absolutely does not. I ask them to tell me the definition of a word, and they have to orally express the definition of that word. There is no verbal comprehension. I ask them to kind of compare two words together, like cat and dog. Tell me how they're alike. They have to verbally express how it is. So VCI is oral expression index, not a verbal comprehension index. But so in all those types of assessments, he was doing okay with some of his vocabulary. Okay? But he had a really hard time with, like, trying to figure out antonyms, and his reasoning skills weren't so hot, which could definitely impact his comprehension later on. So this is, again, this is about his vocabulary, his understanding of the world around him, his general knowledge, all that kind of stuff. So the people who do really well on background knowledge are people on Jeopardy. They have way too much crystallized background knowledge. Okay, I have Lady Gaga songs that are in my brain. They've been crystallized. I want them out, but they're always in there. That's my part of my background knowledge. In reasoning skills, he did great on a lot of different areas, except on the one that tapped in to reason with background knowledge. The one that's circled in red. But other thing that he had to reason things out, he did really well, a really good thinker. His working memory, able to kind of juggle a whole bunch of different information. Remember I said about snap and put the ul sound in there? That's working memory, trying to adjust all the different sounds and try to move all that all at once. That's working memory. He actually had a pretty good working memory. Where he was having difficulty, he lacked fluency when I wanted him to kind of rapidly name different pictures that he would definitely know. So I did that a couple of times, and he was not good at this. So I would just show him a bunch of pictures. I just say, name them, star, ball, cat, wherever it is. He'd be like star, ball, cat at a real slow pace. When you read, if I read Jack and Jill went up, that's too slow, right? He had a hard time doing all that. He was very slow and deliberate trying to come up with that and try to retrieve what those things were. So imagine reading a word, you have to recognize what that squiggle is to know what that word is. And he had a hard time with that. His auditory processing or his phonemic awareness was awful. So his phonemic awareness was bad. He had a really hard time with substituting different sounds, had no flow at all. Just was not sure about any of the sounds. And this kid's in 9th grade kind of thing, by my 10th grade, excuse me. Okay. And then I made my own cluster for word identification, and it was not good for a whole host of things. There was one thing, if you look, this thing called orthographic processing. I would show him a word like the word there, T-H-E-I-R. Good, I don't even know what I'm saying because I'm talking so fast right now. So that I would show him the word for 1 second, and then I flip the card and it would say like I-E, and I say, was that letter pair in that word? He only had 1 second to see the word. In essence, automatic recognition. Does that make sense? If you can't recognize those letter sequences automatically, you're gonna have a hard time reading the word. Your fluency is gonna go down. The lower your fluency, the lower your comprehension. But it all starts with phonological phonemic awareness. And he was just bad at that.
Hey, Andy, it's Julie. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, but we're really low on time, and there's already a couple questions that are
Okay,
out
good.
there.
So I'll stop here.
And thank you so much. Like
Yeah,
this has been fantastic.
No.
And you've made me chuckle through the end of the day too,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
a plus. But if you want to finish up something about this case study, that's okay.
Yeah. So quick, the last thing, I'll just go to the summary that if you look there, it says, within the simple view of reading framework, it's clear that Vince's primary difficulties in the area of decoding and limited automatic sight word vocabulary. Does that make sense, the decoding part? And then I put in the other stuff about what they should do with the kid. And at the end of the day, you know, I said, you know, you guys have to make the decision whether you think it's a learning disability or whether it's a 504. Okay. But you'll see on the left my conclusions about the strengths and weaknesses. So when I do my assessments, I look at pattern of strengths and weaknesses to identify disability. And so he had a good working memory, good learning, good visual spatial, good reasoning skills, but his word identification, reading fluency was bad. And these areas were also bad, and all these impact reading and comprehension of reading.
So one of the questions then is, you know, how can parents and others and teachers and professionals kind of push the use of a structured learning program or reading program in their school?
Yeah, and I'm just noticing now I look like I'm in a dark cave, so I apologize about that. So it's very exciting for me.
It didn't look like that from the distance, actually.
Okay, good, actually. So one thing is to collect data about things. That's number one. That people start talking about how balanced literacy seems to be helping, but I never see that slope of improvement of those kids who are struggling to read. So if that's happening, then what are you talking about? I just saw this one presentation where they're all excited about the dashboard they created, but the excitement was around the dashboard, not about the data. And so the data wasn't showing any progress going on with those kids, especially when I dug deeper into the data. The kids who had language issues, especially, and also the kids who are bilingual, were performing much worse than everybody else. And the last part would be to get people to learn about the science of reading and to learn about simple view of reading and get more people involved. And that you have the Reading League, which is right here in Syracuse, that do great presentations. On Long Island, you have 5 from 5, I think is in Long Island. Yeah, I believe that's the one. I'm getting all of them mixed up. We have lots of resources in New York just to help that out.
And are some schools moving to this model, or like how many use it?
Yeah, I think that you are starting to see more schools move to it, but it's too slow. Especially, I know a bunch of districts that just this past year bought a balanced literacy approach. So now imagine me going into that school district, right? Mr. Man who wears a tie, right? And says you need to do the simple view of reading, but they just spent $30,000 on the curriculum. So it's not that easy. But if I get, especially I want all the reading teachers to better understand what's going on. And I want my reading specialists to understand the simple view of reading. If they don't understand it, they're not being so special at reading. And they're going to be a big push because they're often the leaders within the school building, I find, within it. And by the way, I know it's 3:45, but I could stay after for a little bit. I don't know if it's okay that I stay after for a little bit. And so I keep answering questions. So I apologize for taking the time, extra time here. So
That's all right. And thank you for being willing to stay, and we'll do that. I do just want to say, for those of you who have to leave, we'd really appreciate it if you would fill out the conference evaluation. That helps us very much in planning for next year, and also thinking about ways we can improve this day, which is our first virtual conference. So thank you everyone for participating. But I will continue. I have a question myself. So as an advocate for students with disabilities, if a parent's coming and saying, or a student's telling me I hate school, I can't read, whatever, and the student's referred to special ed, or they're already in special ed, what kind of evaluation should I be asking for? Is an IQ test and a achievement test going to reveal or give enough information about what my reading struggle might be?
It depends on the evaluator. I'll say that the tools are only good as the evaluator. And that's, for example, like the new Wyatt, whatever people want to call it. They have some really good subtests built by Dr. Kilpatrick. Right? But how you compare and contrast those performances matter. And that's a score doesn't mean anything to me. It matters what happened to get that score. So I'm not trying to hedge here a little bit. I'm trying to be real clear that I get nervous around evaluations from folks who aren't really sure what is reading, what is writing, what is math. That they're going to look at numbers and tell you numbers and say this kid is not disabled or is okay based on just a number. That's unacceptable to me. I've had kids who perform within the average range, but my God, they did a terrible job. So I'll give a quick example. I'm sorry I give this thing where they have to look at a bunch of pictures, and then I turn the page and they have to recall the order of those pictures. So the kid gets 5 seconds to look at the pictures, and the kid goes, star, ball, cat, star, for the 5 seconds. I turn the page, he goes, star, ball, cat. I'm like, oh, good God, you did not remember. You sang a lovely tune. So the kid did great, but that number, and by the way, you can't write in any report, read with caution. Nobody reads my reports with caution. It's caution to the wind whenever I write a report, right? So in terms of the assessment that you want, I want to be able to ask the person, what do they understand about reading? What tests might they be doing, and why are they doing it? To get a better sense of that I look at different, and there's definitely debate around this. I look at different cognitive abilities that impact reading. I want to know the why at the end of the day. That overall IQ doesn't mean anything to me. It's what goes into IQ that means something. That there are some G's, I'm calling the IQ a G, that are made up of different components. So some are really based on reasoning skills, some are really based on background knowledge, while others may include phonemic awareness. So imagine if a G, an IQ, included phonemic awareness and the kid has really bad phonemic awareness. Then the overall G would go down. But what would also be low if the kid has bad phonemic awareness? His reading skills. So now his reading skills are down low, his IQ or G is low, and they say he's a slow learner, when it was auditory processing or phonemic awareness that was impacting both of those performances. Does that make sense? That how often have we heard that the kid's an 80-80 kid, 80 IQ, 80 achievement, and we say he's a slow learner? And that's nonsense, right? Because I've yet to hear about the fast learner. So it's understanding the tools that I think, and and again, no malice is meant by anybody from top down. It's just we need better knowledge out there. And hopefully we get education programs to also promote this stuff. So that was a 5-minute answer to a 10-second question. So I apologize about that. So.
All right, I have another one. That's people might want to sign off, but I'm curious about this because, you know, I'm hearing you, we shouldn't be identifying kids as having learning disabilities if it's a function of teaching. And actually the IDEA says that, you know,
Right.
we don't identify kids for that purpose. But on the other hand, obviously the IDEA allows or provides services that, or rights that would allow us to get the instruction we need.
Right.
You know, that's more structured instruction, extra help, support,
right.
and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of left in a conundrum a little bit when I hear your position, which I understand, and it's consistent with the law, but how do I get that for my kid?
I 100% agree with you. I'm in your camp. The issue is that we should have a good MTSS RTI going on in the school. That kid should be receiving interventions. That kid should be receiving good phoneme grapheme training for that kid who's struggling. You don't need special ed for that. If we had a good RTI process. We don't. In so many districts, I say, so how's your RTI stuff going? They go, everyone starts laughing. We have to do, as advocates, I really want to get a sense of what the heck is going on. What is your tier 1 program? Because if you don't have a good tier 1 program, everything else starts to collapse. And that's why I say special ed is not so special. In fact, sometimes when you go to special ed, you're not getting as much in terms of instruction as you would in tier 3. If it was a good tier 3, how many school districts have AIS? And they say the intervention is AIS. And I'm like, no, what happens in AIS? And everybody around the table, again, no malice is meant, will say, well, he's getting AIS. I go, I don't know what that means. And so as a parent, as an advocate, tell me that if you think of all the different tiers, that's a continuum of care. That what is that care? What is that dosage that you're giving kids to help them learn how to read, do math, and write, or be better social emotionally? What is that dosage? How often are you doing it? And are you doing it consistently? If you're not doing consistently, well, don't blame the kid. If you're doing it infrequently, don't blame the kid. Right? If I go to the doctor and the doctor says, listen, you have to take this medication for a month straight every single day, and I take it 2 days out of the month, and I complain to the doctor, I'm not getting any better, well, that's on me, not the medication. So we have so much, right now, if we stopped all research, we would know how to teach all kids how to read, do math, and write, that the special ed number should be much lower. But we're not, as education programs, I think that's where I really look at, of how are we teaching the teachers, teaching school psychologists, teaching speech language pathologists, of what these things are, and we'll have a much better system to go by. But you're right. So the last thing I'll say on that, Julie, is that I'm in that position as a school psychologist. People hate me because I'm saying this kid is not learning disabled, therefore should not get special ed, right? But does the kid clearly need help? Absolutely. And now I'm put in a position. Is special ed really the place? Oftentimes I find it's not. So I need to push people to kind of do something different, if that follows. Right. So I think it's where you are, what you're talking about right now, Julie, is an impossible position. That ultimately in a lot of districts, you're going to have to identify the kid with special ed needs so they get more time on test, get things read to them. But I'm telling you, they're not being taught the right skills to get, isn't the point to get out of special ed?
Right.
Right. Supposedly, right. But in my mind, that if I've identified that kid with a neurological issue, that's neurological. That's not going away anytime soon. But so that's why I'm very cautious before I identify. But I understand that at times, I'll say, let the kid have special ed. But that's just to get the kid through rather than teach the kid the specific skills. And I know that's exactly what's happening. Again, because everyone feels the hopelessness that I think you have well versed. because we want our kids to get better. But we're putting them in a position where they're not going to get any better, and we just get more frustrated along the way.
Thank you. That's very helpful and very real. And I can see in the chat that, you know, people are agreeing with that. Someone asked how they can replicate you. I already mentioned in a private chat to Nancy that I'm so grateful that you are teaching school psychologists and giving them this information and getting them to see things this way.
Right.
And I'm sure we will get there someday, but I appreciate your efforts and putting yourself out there with these views.
Yeah, and people could contact me, that's fine. And it's up to you of what you want to do. If you want to shut it down now, that's fine. I can stay for longer, it's up to you.
Does anyone have any other questions? We can't get child specific, okay? We're just,
Right.
any general questions?
Right, no diagnosing over Zoom. Okay, great.
I think we're good. So,
That's fine.
but thank you so much.
Thanks for all your work your organization does. I always appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.